A family home, a gated community, a neighborhood where children play without fear and neighbors greet each other with warm smiles. It was the kind of place where safety wasn't a concern, where the idea of tragedy felt distant, something that happened in another city, another state, to people on the news. Inside one of these homes, a family lived what appeared to be a picture-perfect life. A loving father, a devoted mother, 3 beautiful children. Their days were filled with laughter, with holiday traditions, with bedtime stories and goodnight kisses. A family held together by love, or so the world believed. On the surface, everything seemed ordinary. A father who had dedicated his life to healing others, a man trusted by his patients, respected in his profession. A mother who cared for her children with unwavering devotion. A home that should have been filled with warmth and protection. But in the final weeks of 2019, something changed. Calls went unanswered. Mail piled up. Christmas decorations still hung outside long after the holiday had passed. Friends grew concerned. Family members began asking questions. And then, law enforcement arrived at the doorstep. When the door finally opened, the air inside was thick with an unshakable silence. Officers stepped forward, the weight of something unseen pressing against them. Then, the discovery, a revelation so horrific, it would send shockwaves far beyond the quiet streets of Celebration, Florida. A doctor, a man sworn to preserve life, had taken it in the most brutal way imaginable. His wife, his children, their futures, their dreams, their laughter, all extinguished. What could drive a father to do the unthinkable? What led a man of medicine to bring death into his own home? And why? Why did it take so long for the world to see what was hiding in plain sight? This is the story of Anthony Todt, a husband, a father, a respected member of his community. A man who concealed secrets so disturbing, the truth would leave even the most seasoned investigators struggling to comprehend the depths of what had unfolded behind closed doors. Stay with us as we unravel the shocking truth behind this case. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like and share for more thrilling stories. December 2019. Celebration, Florida. A town that was never supposed to be touched by tragedy. It wasn't just a name. Celebration was built as a vision of perfection. Designed by the Walt Disney Company in the 1990s, it was meant to be an idyllic escape, a place where families could live in harmony, where life felt like a carefully crafted storybook. The streets were pristine, the homes meticulously designed. Crime was virtually unheard of. In one of those homes, nestled behind neatly trimmed hedges and white picket fences, lived the Todt family. On the surface, they embodied everything this community represented. A father, Anthony Todt, 44 years old, was a physical therapist with a successful practice in Connecticut. His work was dedicated to helping people heal, to restoring movement and relieving pain. Patients trusted him. Colleagues respected him. He was a man who projected stability, competence, and compassion. His wife, Megan Todt, 42 years old, had been the heart of their home. She was soft-spoken, kind, deeply devoted to her children. Alec, 13, the eldest son, was entering his teenage years, a quiet, intelligent boy who looked up to his father. Tyler, 11, was full of energy, always ready to explore and play. And Zoe, just 4 years old, was the baby of the family. A little girl with bright eyes, unaware of the darkness that would soon consume their home. From the outside, they were a happy, thriving family. Anthony ran his business, Megan homeschooled the children. They split their time between their home and Celebration and their physical therapy practice in Connecticut. A lifestyle that many would envy. A family that, to the outside world, appeared complete. But beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to form. In the weeks leading up to the new year, something felt off. Relatives noticed their calls were going straight to voicemail. Text messages were left unanswered. Christmas came and went, but there were no updates, no holiday photos, no cheerful messages from the Todts. Then, the mailbox began to overflow. Notices were taped to the door. The once lively home was silent, curtains drawn, lights off at night. At first, it was easy to dismiss. Maybe they had gone on a trip. Maybe they were just busy. But as the days stretched on, concern turned into unease. Something wasn't right. And then, a chilling revelation. Megan's family hadn't heard from her in weeks. Not a call, not a text, nothing. Panic began to set in. The Todt family wasn't just ignoring messages. They had vanished. When law enforcement finally arrived at the house, they had no idea what they were about to walk into. What they would find behind those doors would shake an entire community to its core. Anthony Todt had spent years building what looked like a successful life. He owned a physical therapy practice, Family Physical Therapy, in Colchester, Connecticut. Patients trusted him. He had a steady stream of clients, and from the outside, his business seemed to be thriving. But behind closed doors, the reality was much different. For years, Anthony had been hiding a secret that threatened to destroy everything he had built. He was drowning in debt, millions of dollars in loans, credit card balances, and unpaid bills that had spiraled out of control. His business wasn't thriving. It was collapsing under the weight of financial mismanagement. And then, there was something even more troubling. Anthony had been running a fraudulent scheme through his physical therapy practice. Investigators later discovered that he had been billing insurance companies for treatments that never happened, fabricating medical procedures, and falsifying patient records. For months, authorities had been closing in, building a case against him. By late 2019, the walls were closing in. The FBI had launched an investigation. Federal agents were preparing to arrest him. He knew it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. To the outside world, Anthony Todt was a devoted family man. But in reality, he was living a double life, one filled with deception, desperation, and financial ruin. He spent most of his time traveling between Connecticut and Florida, running his business while trying to keep up the illusion that everything was fine. He would leave his wife and children behind in celebration, board a plane to Connecticut, and spend days juggling patients, fraudulent insurance claims, and unpaid bills. Then he'd return home, pretending that everything was normal. But nothing was normal. Back in Florida, Megan was starting to sense the strain. She had been homeschooling their 3 children, managing the household, and trusting Anthony to take care of their finances. But as the months went on, things were getting harder. Bills weren't being paid. The mortgage was behind. Food was running low. And then, the eviction notices started coming. By December 2019, the Todt family home in Celebration was in foreclosure. The bank had issued warnings. The utilities were in danger of being shut off. Their carefully crafted world was collapsing. As Anthony's financial troubles escalated, so did his behavior. Friends and family noticed that he was becoming distant, harder to reach. He stopped returning calls. His normally cheerful demeanor seemed forced. And then silence. By late December, Megan's family had grown increasingly worried. Normally, she was in constant contact with them. She would text updates, send photos of the kids, and call regularly. But suddenly, all communication stopped. At first, they tried to rationalize it. Maybe they were traveling for the holidays. Maybe their phones were off. Maybe they were just busy. But when New Year's came and went without a single word, the worry turned into panic. Megan's sister started calling over and over, leaving voicemails that were never returned. Friends knocked on the door, but no one answered. The house remained eerily quiet. Then came the final red flag, the mailbox. Neighbors noticed that mail was piling up. Packages were left untouched. Bills and foreclosure notices were stacked against the door. The Christmas decorations were still up, but no lights had been turned on for days. Something was wrong. Terrified, Megan's family contacted law enforcement. They asked for a welfare check, hoping, praying, that everything was okay. But when deputies arrived at the Todt home, there was no response. The house was locked, silent, lifeless, and behind those walls, an unthinkable horror was waiting to be uncovered. January 13th, 2020. Celebration, Florida. For weeks, the Todt home had been a silent, unsettling presence in the neighborhood. A once lively household, now eerily still. The Christmas decorations remained, frozen in time. The mailbox overflowed. The blinds stayed shut. Law enforcement had received multiple calls from concerned family members. Megan's sister had been relentless, pleading with officers to check on the family. Something was wrong. She could feel it. That morning, Osceola County deputies, along with federal agents investigating Anthony Todt for fraud, arrived at the home. This was supposed to be a routine welfare check, a simple knock on the door, a chance to confirm that everyone inside was safe. But nothing about what they found was routine. When officers knocked, there was no answer. The house was locked. No movement inside. They had no choice. They forced their way in. The moment they stepped inside, they were met with an overwhelming, putrid stench. A smell so thick, so unnatural, it sent a wave of unease through the officers. It was the unmistakable odor of death. As they moved deeper into the house, the weight of what they were about to uncover pressed down on them. Then, they found the bodies. In an upstairs bedroom, the remains of Megan Todt lay on a mattress. Beside her, the lifeless forms of their children, Alec, 13, Tyler, 11, and Zoe, just 4 years old. Their small bodies, once full of life, now eerily still. And near them, the family dog, Breezy, who had also been killed. The scene was beyond anything the officers had expected. These were not victims of a break-in. There was no sign of an intruder, no evidence of a struggle. This was something far worse. Then, in another room, they found him. Anthony Todt. He was alive. Barely. His body was weak, sluggish, his movement slow. He told the officers he had taken an enormous amount of Benadryl in an attempt to end his own life. His voice was slurred, his eyes glassy. Yet, despite it all, he was still breathing. They immediately took him into custody. But as paramedics arrived to assess his condition, Anthony began to speak. And what he said would send shockwaves through the entire investigation. At first, Anthony Todt tried to insist that Megan had been the one responsible for the murders. He told investigators that she had taken the lives of their children before taking her own, and that he had only planned to die alongside them. But as the hours passed, his story began to change. Eventually, he admitted it. He was the one who had killed them. One by one, he described how he had taken the lives of his wife and children. He claimed to have suffocated them, pressing pillows over their faces, one after the other. He said he had given them Benadryl before the killings, hoping it would make them drowsy, make it easier. He spoke with a chilling detachment, as if he were recounting a story rather than confessing to the murder of his own family. And then, he revealed something even more disturbing. Anthony claimed that the murders were part of a twisted plan, a belief that the world was ending, that death was the only way to keep his family safe. He spoke of an impending apocalypse, of a journey to the other side, where they would all be together again. Investigators were stunned. Was this the delusion of a desperate man, grasping for a justification? Or had Anthony truly convinced himself that his actions had some higher purpose? As the news of the Todt family's murders spread, Celebration, Florida, this carefully crafted community designed to be a sanctuary from the chaos of the outside world, was rocked to its core. Neighbors who had once seen Anthony as a friendly father, a devoted husband, now struggled to reconcile that image with the horrors uncovered inside his home. Vigils were held. Candles were lit. Photos of Megan and the children were placed outside their home, a quiet tribute to the lives stolen too soon. In the days that followed, Anthony Todt was formally charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. But one question lingered. Why? Why would a father, a man who had sworn to heal others, turn on his own flesh and blood in such a brutal, calculated way? The truth behind that question would soon unfold in the courtroom. But no matter what Anthony Todt claimed, no explanation could ever justify the horror he had inflicted on his own family. The courtroom was silent as Anthony Todt stood before the judge. His once respected name had become synonymous with betrayal, a chilling reminder of the horrors that had unfolded behind the walls of his Celebration, Florida home. For months, prosecutors had meticulously built their case, presenting evidence that painted a gruesome picture of premeditation and deceit. The trial, which drew national attention, would reveal not only the brutality of the crime but also the deep fractures in Anthony Todt's psyche. Now, the moment of reckoning had arrived. The prosecution wasted no time laying out their case. They described, in haunting detail, how Anthony Todt had systematically drugged and suffocated his family. They presented forensic evidence, high doses of Benadryl found in the victims' systems, the lack of defensive wounds suggesting they were unable to fight back. The extent of decomposition that indicated their bodies had been left in the house for weeks before law enforcement arrived. The jury listened, their faces grim, as prosecutors played Todt's own confession. His voice, calm and matter-of-fact, as he described the killings. Then came the defense. Anthony Todt's lawyers attempted to argue that he had been mentally unstable, that he was suffering from a psychotic break, a delusional belief that his family's deaths were part of some greater plan. They painted him as a man pushed beyond his limits. Financial ruin, federal investigations, the weight of his own failures crushing him until he saw no way out. But the prosecution dismantled this argument with chilling efficiency. They presented bank records, showing how Anthony had methodically drained his family's finances long before the murders. They uncovered text messages, emails, and medical fraud schemes that proved he had been living a lie for years. They called upon psychiatrists who testified that while Anthony may have been deeply troubled, He knew exactly what he was doing. Perhaps the most damning piece of evidence was the timeline. Investigators revealed that Anthony Todt had lived in the house with the bodies of his wife and children for weeks after the murders. He had continued eating, sleeping, even watching television while their lifeless forms lay just rooms away. To the jury, there was no doubt. This was not the breakdown of a desperate man. This was cold, calculated murder. After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated. The verdict was swift, guilty on all counts. Anthony Todt was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge, his voice steady but firm, condemned his actions as the ultimate betrayal of a father, a husband, a man who had vowed to protect the very people he had destroyed. In the gallery, Megan Todt's family sat, their faces lined with grief. They had waited so long for justice. And yet, as the gavel fell, there was no relief. No sentence, no punishment could undo what had been done. Despite the trial's conclusion, questions remained. Why did Anthony Todt choose this path? Was it truly financial despair? A delusion? Or was it something even darker? An act of control, a desperate attempt to keep his family with him, no matter the cost? Some wondered if Megan Todt had ever known the extent of her husband's fraud. If she had seen the warning signs and ignored them, hoping against hope that things would get better. And what about Anthony himself? He showed little emotion in court, no outbursts, no visible remorse. Had he convinced himself that he was innocent? Or was he simply resigned to his fate? The Todt family home in Celebration remained empty for months after the murders. Eventually, the house was cleared out, the Christmas decorations taken down. But the memory of what had happened there lingered. Neighbors spoke of how the case had changed them, how it had shattered the illusion of safety in their tight-knit community. Friends of Alec and Tyler struggled to process the loss. Teachers, classmates, and parents mourned children whose lives had been stolen too soon. For Megan Todt's family, the grief was overwhelming. They had lost a daughter, 3 grandchildren, and any sense of peace. In interviews, Megan's sister spoke of the unbearable pain of knowing she had called for help, begged authorities to intervene, only to discover it was already too late. No one would ever truly understand why Anthony Todt did what he did. But one thing was certain. His name would forever be etched into the dark history of Celebration, Florida. A man who had once healed others, now known only for the destruction he left behind. The case of Anthony Todt serves as a grim reminder that appearances can be deceiving. A smiling family photo, a successful career, a charming home in a picturesque town. None of it guaranteed safety. And behind closed doors, the unimaginable had unfolded. What do you think truly drove Anthony Todt to murder his own family? Was it desperation, delusion, or something far more calculated? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this case as shocking as we did, be sure to hit the subscribe button for more true crime stories that uncover the darkest corners of human nature.